Good morning. I'm Jonathan Fanton, president of the American Academy, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's meeting on technology and the future of work. And also to say this is for those of you not from this area, this is a typical midwinter, mid-February day in Cambridge. So must be a good sign that somebody's very happy you're here. We had a terrific opening reception last night. Anthony, thank you very much for hosting, and Ronette for organizing. And I'd like to give a special welcome to you for being here. We'll hear from you in a moment. No, that's fine. That's right. You'll just have to, people just have to watch your face as I speak to see whether you like or not. You know how that works. In any case, a special welcome to you and also to Professor Andrew Hopper, who is Treasurer and Vice President of the Royal Society, and we'll have the pleasure of hearing from both in a moment. As one of the oldest learned societies in the U.S., the American Academy has advanced scholarly inquiry in the interest of the common good for more than 2 centuries. 62 scholar patriots, John Adams, John Hancock, James Bowdoin among them, founded the Academy way back in 1780. I know that's not old by your standards, but it is in the U.S. And of course, it was in the midst of the American War for Independence. But despite that fact, the Academy elected its first foreign honorary members from the U.K. in 1782. Collector Thomas Brand Hollis, economist Richard Price, and chemist and theologian Joseph Priestley. Won't surprise you that all three were sympathetic to America's quest for independence, but I think it's a nice sign that only 2 years after our founding we were electing members from the UK. And all were members of the Royal Society as well. As stated in the American Academy's 1780 Charter, our purpose is to cultivate every art and science which may tend to advance the interest, honor, dignity, and happiness of a free, independent, and virtuous people. Well, today the Academy brings together scholars and experts from across many disciplines and professions to support rigorous scholarship that informs policymaking and does, in fact, seek to advance the common good. The Academy is proud of its standing as an independent, nonpartisan institution committed to evidence-based research. Our goal is to create opportunities for original thinking and intellectual exchange on critical questions facing the U.S., but not just the U.S., the world as a whole, as does our topic today. The Academy's membership includes 5,600 leading thinkers from every academic discipline, but also from business, journalism, the performing arts, public affairs, medicine, and more. Among them are 600 international honorary members representing 45 countries, places like Brazil, China, Egypt, Israel, Nigeria, Sweden, Uganda, and it won't surprise you that the largest concentration outside the United States is in the UK with 150 international honorary members. And so that, again, I think reminds us of the great opportunities we have to work together. Over the next 2 days, I encourage you to spend some time reading the acceptance letters from Academy members that hang along the wall. On that side of the building, you'll see letters from George Washington, Charles Darwin, Albert Einstein, among others. Of particular interest for our meeting today are 2 letters from technological innovators across 2 centuries, Charles Babbage, a British mathematician and inventor who originated the concept of a computing machine and is widely considered to be the father of the computer. He was also a fellow of the Royal Society. And then William Hewlett, who along with his longtime friend and partner David Packard, ushered in the modern technological age here. So I'd like to also invite your attention to an exhibition of documents that will be in the room where we have lunch, that will show the historic connection between the American Academy and the Royal Society and the role of technology in this Academy's history. Among the documents you will see is inventor and Academy member Daniel Treadwell's 1835 account of witnessing Babbage's difference engine in action. Even though the machine was not, and I guess never would be, operating at full capacity, Treadwell nevertheless considered it to be, and I quote, one of the greatest pieces of intricate conceptions ever put into form. Well, from the beginning, the American Academy valued connections with leading citizens, scholars, and learned societies around the world, and the Royal Society has been an important and maybe even the #1 example. While still in the throes of the war in 1781, John Adams sent a copy of the Academy's charter and statutes across the Atlantic to the Royal Society in London. The documents were accompanied by a letter expressing hope that the Royal Society would, and I quote here, be governed by the neutrality of philosophy and favor the Academy with its encouragement. So said Adams. Now, according to our archival records, the Royal Society sent a reply explaining that responses to such notices were not customary. So we were left wondering. But relations between our two institutions quickly improved after the Treaty of Paris was signed. In 1786, Sir Joseph Banks, president of the Royal Society, met with John Adams, who was then serving as ambassador to the Netherlands. Adams and Sir Joseph initiated a publication exchange that continued in various forms throughout the 20th century. And one might say that today's meeting, the exchange of ideas made possible through a collaboration between our two institutions, marks a continuation of that tradition that Adams and Sir Joseph began way back in 1786. And so I do feel a bit of history is being reaffirmed and reinforced in this room today. We're delighted to have you all here with us to discuss technology and the future of work. The idea for the meeting grew out of a number of conversations that we had with our members this past year, and we quickly found that the topic resonated with Academy members from nearly every scholarly discipline and professional background. Equally important, there are a growing number of studies that come out in recent years, and the Royal Society's 2017 report on machine learning, I think, was one of the most interesting. And these reports have made it clear that the topic is one that no institution with an interest in promoting healthy and inclusive societies can ignore. This is really a critical issue. When the Royal Society reached out to express interest in holding a joint meeting on the topic in September of last year, we thought it presented a wonderful opportunity to bring together scholars, experts, practitioners from both sides of the Atlantic representing a wide range of experience, insight, and expertise. Today we have with us computer scientists and sociologists, economists and engineers, foundation heads and business executives, historians and policymakers, mathematicians and writers, and innovators in the field of education and labor. So I think we're well positioned to have a lively, informed conversation about the future of work, and I look forward to learning from you. And it will, of course, be an interesting last session in which we talk about where do we go from here. This meeting dovetails with a number of reports and studies underway at the American Academy that illustrate our commitment to shaping and sustaining a healthy democratic society with opportunity for all. Among them is a report from our Commission on the Future of Higher Undergraduate Education, which emphasizes the importance of preparing undergraduates to be informed and engaged citizens who understand the values, skills, and behaviors that contribute to a healthy democracy. The final section of that report, it's a green cover report you'll see out and around the building. Please pick it up. The final section considers the still vital role that education will play in the growing gig economy and within a workforce facing even greater levels of automation. Another example is a recent report from our Public Face of Science project that just came out called Perceptions of Science in America. One of the findings of the report is that 52% of Americans think that science makes our way of life change too fast. The report also reveals that Americans with less education are more likely to agree with that statement. For example, while 69% of the respondents with less than a high school education agreed that science changes our life too fast, only 36% of respondents with a baccalaureate degree agree to that statement. Also, copies of this report with a blue cover are all around the building. So now I'd like to thank the co-chairs of the meeting for their leadership in bringing all of us here together for a series of what are going to be really good panels. Peter Donnelly of the Wellcome Trust Center for Human Genetics at the University of Oxford, Margaret Levy of the Center of Advanced Studies and Behavioral Science at Stanford, Moshe Varde of the Kennedy Institute for Information Technology at Rice, and you'll hear more from each of them in just a moment. I'd also like to thank the dedicated staff who've supported this meeting, including Luke Clark and Jessica Montgomery, Senior Policy Advisors of the Royal Society, and Ronette Prower, Director of the Eastern U.S. Division of the UK Science and Innovation Network. And here at the Academy, I want to thank John Randall, Director of our Science, Engineering, and Technology Program, who's taken the lead, Nikki Lefebvre, the Morton Mandel Presidential Fellow, and Greg Savigno, a Program Coordinator in the science area. All of you have done just tremendous work, not just in the logistics, but really in the vision, the intellectual hard work of deciding who should come, how we organize the panels, and how we follow through. It's now my pleasure to introduce Andrew Hopper, a professor of computer technology at the University of Cambridge and treasurer and vice president of the Royal Society. Professor Hopper has worked for a number of multinational companies and co-founded 13 spinouts and startups. The companies he's co-founded have received 5 Queen's Awards for Enterprise, and Professor Hopper is a fellow of both the Royal Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering. In 2007, he was awarded the rank of Commander in the Order of the British Empire, and just last year he received the Bakerian Medal from the Royal Society, so please join me in welcoming Professor Hopper.
Thank you, Jonathan. So, colleagues, friends, distinguished guests, on behalf of the Royal Society, welcome to this meeting. As you no doubt know, Royal Society has about 1,600 fellows, and was, I can't help this, is 358 years old, so it's like Oxford and Cambridge, or whatever. But and I'm a rookie, so I've just been treasurer since the 30th of November, so I'm just learning the ropes. So I'd like to thank Professor Fanton and the American Academy for hosting and partnering on this endeavor. And also to the UK Foreign Office and the British Consulate for encouraging us and lubricating things in a number of ways. This bilateral relationship that has been mentioned has lasted for a long time, and it is really a great pleasure to know that we've had fellows of both academies, of both institutions over the years. This whole notion of will technology disrupt the workforce or disrupt the world as a challenge is not new. Discussions on this topic have been going on since the early days of both our academies. And so in some sense, what's new, but in other sense, is this different? Is perhaps a question I'd like to have some clarity on in my mind. And so collaborating, discussing this, and perhaps answering that and many other questions is appropriate at this moment. And when I think of what's happening to the world and setting the context for this question, I can't help but think of the amazing digital revolution that's happening over this sort of 20, 30, 40-year period that we're in the middle of right now. And when I describe it, I think of it as the following. I hope you share the view that essentially everything in life will now have a digital representation. Everything from your genomes to where the cars are, to where the trees are, almost to where every leaf is. And that digital representation can be transmitted across the world at no cost, essentially. It can be processed at almost no cost. And it can be stored at almost no cost. So everything in life, digitized, transmitted, processed. And at the other end, currently 8 billion recipients of that. People on the planet doing this or whatever. So the receiving end is also completely ubiquitous. So it's hardly a surprise, given that framing, and it's happening, we're right in the middle of it, that there are questions of the kind we describe, we're talking about today, but also many others. So within that, the Royal Society, particularly in its policy unit, but not solely in its policy unit, is taking on a number of projects, has taken on, continues to take on a number of projects in these areas, and trying to make its contribution, as are many others, to understanding and navigating this transition and helping society to a better world. To that effect, a number of reports have been produced, an earlier one actually on cybersecurity, a more recent one on machine learning, which Peter was good enough to chair. For me, the executive summary, if you forgive me, Peter, of that one is, don't regulate the algorithms, regulate the use of algorithms. Good stewardship, things like that. It's a fantastic report, which I commend to you. And the suggestions are that there might have to be some kind of policy interventions to support machine learning and AI, but I would actually say the issues are perhaps even broader. And then another report which was done with the British Academy is on the governance of big data, some broader perspectives of what the rules are, how should we approach this. One of the recommendations in that report is that there should be an independent, neutral, shall we say, body which looks after, is in charge of the stewardship of this whole area, and is sort of independent in the sense it's not government, it's not industry, it's not just academia, it's independent of all that, but taking the best of those worlds. And as I mentioned the word industry, of course, a lot of the action, in fact, I would argue the majority of the action, certainly the practical action, but perhaps even the research action is in industry. And it's not always clear what's happening for industrial, commercial reasons. And yet we have to engage with them very substantially. And my impression is they're very keen to engage, actually, because they've done rather better, in my view, than they expected. So it's not like they're shutting us out, but we have to understand that the business models, in the sense of generating income and paying their employees' mortgages, paying salaries to pay mortgages, is part of this. In the UK context, this is framed partially as, by a thing called the industrial strategy, and another report which actually Wendy Hall over there did as part of that for the government is what's the industrial strategy. In other words, the priorities for the country, how does that relate to this topic of AI? And that the government recommended, put forward money for a Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation. Another direction that the Royal Society is pushing forth on is the idea of privacy-enhancing technologies and trying to figure out strategies for that, what sort of research might be done, what to encourage so that not just security but privacy is understood in this big context that I describe. Now, here we are in the US, and you are a world leader in this, so the engagement is natural and not influenced by any other factors, political or anything else. The action is very substantially here, so it behoves us to engage. And so engaging with the American Academy is where you have a tradition of the broader view, of the round view, is very attractive and very appropriate that we should be jointly doing this particular event. Now, there is a whole bus full of Royal Fellows of the Royal Society here, and I hope you get to know them. We're all pretty friendly and chummy, and we don't bite, and we're up for it. So do get to know us, and then perhaps we can reciprocate back in the UK, and look forward to perhaps meeting you there. Of course, I'm very pleased that there is a much broader audience than just pointy-head techies like me. So whether you're a historian, a social scientist, whatever your background is outside the geek world, you're very welcome. And I personally am very interested to hear what you've got to say. So finally, just my own thanks to the people who have made this possible. So Professor Fanton and your team, John Randall, Greg Savageau, and Nick Lefebvre. The UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Anthony, thank you very much. And Ronit Proa, and our very own Luke Clark there, and Jess, where are you, Jess? Jess Montgomery, thank you so much for putting so much work into this, which I'm sure will be entertaining, enjoyable, I hope a little bit provocative, but not frightening. So thank you very much. Welcome.